everywhere there was intolerance.
When?
There had to be.
When?
Well, wherever.
No. Don't say whenever. When?
Why did the Islam?
I'm not saying it's someone else's source. I am saying in countries that where Muslims are living, previously they have been colonized already. What do the colonialists do? The colonialists, when they go there, they don't just go there and say, I know, nice meeting you and bye-bye. They implement their system, their culture, their laws and their regulations. So whether you've been very, what's it called, minimalist in understanding. I am saying it's a multifactorial reasons why there's a problem. And part of the problem that we've inherited in our Muslim land is colonialism. When the colonial masters left, they left with an education system that was bankrupt and totally unsuitable for an Islamic society. When they left with a social system in which they were still the problem. So,
I'm just going to ask a simple question.
So
before they arrived,
why
what
don't
was
you,
happening before they arrived?
Right, before they arrived. So let's go back when Islam was implemented. How many cases of rape, stealing, highway robbery? How many cases?
How are we going to know?
By looking at historical reports.
How far back do you go then?
Go back when Islam implemented the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From there, look at few hundred years after that. Look at blocks of centuries. When Islam was implemented, do you know, my friend? Do you know? Just to give an example.
Another question I want
Before
to
you, no, I want you to engage rather than think ahead with the question. When Islam was implemented in some Muslim countries, at that time there were no security cameras, CCTV cameras. There weren't any. There weren't these electrical shutters. What there were, people were shops open, like in a table or something, and they were during the time of Salah prayer, like 5 times a prayer, midday, around, afternoon time and so on, right? Daytime. Why don't you go at night time? When they heard the call of prayer, they would just simply lay a cloth over the table, merchandise, leave their shops, doesn't matter how expensive it is, and then go to the mosque and pray and come back. Now, how was it possible? Do you think it's possible in this country to do that today?
That isn't my question.
No, I want you to think on this. How in an Islamic society at one point it was possible.
And now?
Wait.
In what
I want you
is it
to
possible?
compare and reflect. Why was it possible then, and why is it impossible now?
Possible then. You have no evidence.
Well, we have historical reports.
You don't. I'm sorry.
I've been to Mecca and Medina, and I'm still there today.
Khalifa was outside on the street where you're from, and think on this as a simple example. That's all I'm asking. Is that you have your Islam, and I have my Christianity, let's say, and we're going back to the dawn of time, right? And we meet, and you and I are very affable. We understand each other, and you tell me that you follow Islam, and I tell you I follow God or whatever. And we go back to our communities. We're quite happy. We get on with each other. We go back. You go back, and I tell my people, guess what? I've seen this really lovely guy that believes in Islam. I don't quite know what it is, and you go back. And you say, oh, I've met some guys and they follow some sort of God. If we had tolerance at that point, none of this would have got any further. But somebody, not you, not me, somebody in our tribe, and think we're going right back to the very dawn of time, somebody in my tribe goes, those bastards, they should believe what we believe. Now, that is an innate situation. This is not learned. You can't learn it if it was never there. People say, oh, racism is learned. Well, who was the first guy who started it?
Okay.
And where did he get it from?
So let me address what you just said. I would like you to listen carefully to the response, right? Thank you, as your laws are. So you said, go back in the old times, the dawn of time, when Muslims and Christians were living together, and only there will be some guys who think otherwise. But if you were to consider Islam,
yes,
the teaching of Islam, you would have realized what you so much want and desire is what is the teaching of Islam in the first place.
But didn't Islam split?
You are already interrupting without listening.
But didn't Islam split?
You see, you're already interrupting without listening. I've just started to explain to you the phenomenon of Islam. Islamic teaching is that if you don't want to become a Muslim, you can remain what you are and practice in your own sphere.
Yeah.
That is why in Syria, not today, back in all time, or in Lebanon, or in Egypt, give you some examples, right? Where Muslims and Christians were living side by side,
Absolutely.
practicing their religion side by side. So Islam had no issues with other people. Islam had no issues with tolerating each other.
But they
Islam
did.
is no, they did not. The problem starts in your denial of history and historical reality.
Exactly.
Now tell me, in Egypt,
Yes.
why do we still find in Egypt hundreds and thousands of Christians still living today with the Muslims, with their ancestral line going back all the way to the dawn of time of Prophet Muhammad, if there was no tolerance shown to them?
But somewhere, we can stay with wherever you like.
Stick with Egypt.
Somewhere.
Thank you.
Somewhere there was intolerance.
When?
There had to be.
When?
Well, wherever.
No,
Oh,
don't say whenever. When?
Why did the Islamic religion split into different?
You're not answering the question.
Well, there's
Even if Islam splits into Sunnah,
if the Sufi and the Sunni were tolerant of each other,
not
why
Sunni.
do they kick the Shia?
Okay, brother, one moment.
But not you personally, but some do, don't they?
Again, in Egypt in particular, whether you're Sunni or a Sufi or a Shia, the fact remains in history that Christians and the Jewish people, at one point, they were living side by side. Why? How did they do that if they were intolerant?
Well, where is the intolerance sprung from?
You see, you're very difficult to engage with.
question.
I asked you, you claim...
Are we tolerant now? Are we tolerant now?
Look, the discussion is
Are we tolerant now
my
of
friend,
each other?
my friend.
Are we tolerant?
If you are listening carefully,
Yes.
you would have noticed that Muslims have inherited non-Islam within their societies. So they are not being judged and ruled by, governed by the Islamic principles in totality. That is why there is intolerance even in our Muslim societies today. So today we have a problem. I am saying when Islam was implemented in its entirety, hear my words carefully.
Yes.
Why was it that they were tolerant?
They weren't.
In which
we
period?
wouldn't be here today having this discussion.
In which period
if
they were intolerant?
It doesn't matter which period you start. It had to have started somewhere. You can't say...
I'll tell you when it started.
You can't say, oh look, in 1950 everything was fine. In 1951 it wasn't.
Okay.
Because
may I suggest one thing or ask one thing?
Yeah, go on.
Have you read any of the histories of civilization in Egypt and Syria,
Yes.
Islamic civilization in
Yes.
Spain?
Yes.
Right. Tell me what Islamic tolerance between.
Let's skip with Egypt.
Tell me about.
You started
No,
with Egypt.
tell me about intolerance between Muslims.
In Egypt.
Am I talking about bananas?
No, are you talking
Good.
about...
I'm talking about Muslims and Christians in particular.
Exactly.
In Egypt.
In Egypt.
At what period there were intolerance?
Were there slaves? In this
I am talking about
were there slaves?
people, Muslims and Christians. Whether it was a Muslim slave or a Christian slave, this is not a distinction. Faith as a distinction. When are you listening? When you identify yourself.
How can you tell me that any society that enslaves another society?
You're moving your goalposts from one to the other. Now we're talking about slavery.
No, we're not talking about slavery. We're still talking about tolerance.
We're talking about tolerance between other faiths. Other faiths.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Within the Muslim faith.
Slaves, right? Good.
Let's
Slaves.
assume.
Now, in which period Muslims were intolerant to Christian slaves?
Doesn't matter which period. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Have a good day.
There just isn't any tolerance in the world.